Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and here I am with the definitive boss guides to both Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge and Mega Man GB2. That's right, it's a 2-in-1 package, and I figured I'd do so because most of the Game Boy titles recycle bosses from their NES counterparts, and they have a pretty small roster of bosses overall. Even then, most of these fights have changed enough in the translation from home console to portable that they actually require different strategies to fight them. And given my knowledge on these games well after my reviews on them, I figured I'd make a video about the Game Boy bosses in great detail for both newcomers and veterans. I'm also going to split this video into 2 parts so they do not overlap. All of part 1 will be delegated to Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge, and part 2 will be Mega Man GB2, completely separate from each other. With that said, let's jump right in. DLN 3 Cut Man. 3 damage on contact, 3 damage on rolling cutter. Cut Man's general movement is the same as in the original Mega Man on NES, running forward at you and jumping forward when he gets close. However, Cut Man is much harder in this game for a few factors. He does not take knockback from attacks, and his jumps are much shorter in height. With only 2 possible distances he can jump, a shorter or wider jump, the timing required to walk under Cut Man without getting hurt is extremely tight. Cut Man will only use rolling cutter on the ground, and since he cannot retaliate due to having no knockback, he will usually attack after landing from a jump, though on occasion, he'll attack during the middle of a walk. He has a longer startup to throwing the rolling cutter, which is not aimed at you. The rolling cutter also only goes forward in one direction and goes back to Cut Man the same way. Cut Man may also occasionally throw his rolling cutter right after he gets it back, but this behavior is very rare to see. There's also a minor hitbox bug, where shots will phase through Cut Man on the exact frame that he throws rolling cutter, resulting in no damage. Buster only. The trickiest part of this fight is having to run under Cut Man every time he jumps. At the start of the fight, or after he throws a rolling cutter, you can easily dodge his first jump by running towards him. However, if he continues to pursue you after landing, you gotta turn around at roughly half a second's time to run under the next few jumps. It's not guaranteed to work, as Cut Man may do shorter jumps and land on you anyway. If Cut Man keeps doing jumps, your best bet is for him to do the slightly wider jumps, so the two of you can create a bit more distance. The saving grace with Cut Man in this game is that whenever he throws rolling cutter, he stands still for a long time and is vulnerable to a lot of burst damage. All the Game Boy titles have short boss iframes, so they should be taken advantage of to kill bosses quicker. If you play aggressively and damage Cut Man at every possible opportunity, you should take no more than 3 hits before Cut Man goes down. Weapons. As Super Arm is absent in this game, Cut Man is only weak to Firestorm, which does 2 damage. Although it sounds like a low number, you can time your attacks so the projectile hits first, followed by the shield when Cut Man jumps, which will do 4 damage in one attack. DLN 5 Iceman. 3 damage on contact, 8 damage on Ice Slasher. Iceman is one of the easiest bosses in the game. He retains his pattern and slippery arena from the original Mega Man, but he has been heavily simplified. Iceman now fires 2 sets of 2 Ice Slashers each, which only fly at 2 elevations, low and high. Even though the Ice Slasher can still kill you in 3 hits, it is much easier to jump through the projectiles, even with the awkward, wonky ice physics. Iceman still sticks to the right side of the arena, though he will no longer speed up if you take too long to defeat him. Buster only. The best way to dodge the Ice Slashers is to move in a triangle from the left wall. As you jump over the low ones, go right while doing so, then head left just before you land to return to the left wall. Keep up that cycle, and that's really all there is to avoiding the attacks. If you want to shoot Iceman while he's in the air and speed up the fight, simply wait for the higher Ice Slashers to pass over your head. Do not try anything fancy while moving in that cycle, and you'll never take damage. Weapons. Iceman's weakness is Thunder Beam, which does 8 damage, killing him in 3 hits just like in the NES game. And, fun fact, defeating Iceman with Thunder Beam actually distorts the victory music a little. Alternatively, Rolling Cutter is a secondary weakness that does 2 damage, though it's a bit hard to use due to its shorter range. DLN 7, Fireman. 4 damage on contact, 4 damage on Firestorm. Fireman is one of the easiest bosses in the game. He retains the same movement from the original Mega Man, but he has been heavily simplified. Fireman's Firestorm, which has been scaled down in size, is now only shot once he is a set distance from you. Fireman also only shoots 1 Firestorm at a time, no longer being able to spam. The little ember that was created underneath you has been removed, so jumping in place is all that is needed to dodge the attack. Buster only. There are 2 strategies to fight Fireman. The first and easiest strategy is to simply stay in one spot and keep jumping straight up to dodge the firestorms. Fireman will not move at all as long as you don't go left or right. However, because of the repetition with dodging the attack, it is easy to lose focus and jump too early or too late, which will get you hurt. The best way to avoid this is to react to the first firestorm he shoots out, which you can jump over once you see it created. From there, you can internalize the timing of when he shoots Firestorm after creating it, and jump on that exact timing, which you can repeat until he goes down. The second and more bizarre strategy is to follow Fireman around the room and shoot him as he goes. Since he doesn't counterattack anymore, he will not shoot Firestorm as long as you stay close to him at all times. However, the timing of when he turns around is unpredictable, which makes it tricky to jump over him consistently, and I wouldn't really recommend it at all. Weapons. Fireman's weakness is Ice Slasher, which does 4 damage. You can actually sync up your attacks with your jumps, as Ice Slasher despawns just in time for you to shoot a new one as you jump. Fireman also has a secondary weakness to Rolling Cutter, taking 2 damage from each hit, though the weapon's nature will allow it to deal 2 hits in 1 throw. DLN 8, Elecman. 2 damage on contact, 3 damage on Thunder Beam. Elecman's difficulty has been significantly reduced, to the point of being one of the easiest bosses in the game. His movement is identical to that in the original Mega Man, but his running speed is much slower and the Thunder Beam does way less damage, no longer killing in 3 hits. Although he cannot attack in the air anymore, the Thunder Beam is much harder to jump over, as Mega Man has a shorter jump in the Game Boy titles. While his knockback has been stripped away, his jumps are always directed at you and go much higher. Buster only. It's important to note a visual glitch with Elecman's health bar, as while it is filling up, it will instantly go to full and start the fight a little earlier than usual. This is important to remember, because if unprovoked, Elecman will immediately attack with Thunder Beam and you'll have a limited window to dodge it. However, he can be stopped from ever using this attack. If you start spamming the attack button before the fight starts, which is important to do because of that health bar glitch, Elecman can be tricked into jumping over his first attack point at the start of the fight, forcing him to run back to it once he lands. Because Elecman jumps so high, it's very easy for him to overshoot his attack points, and then you can keep spamming to bring him further and further from where he wants to go. Once you got him far enough, you can start orbiting around Elecman, which means you have to jump over and run under him as he runs and jumps, in a continuous loop that forces him away from his attack point. Just like with Fireman, this loop can also get monotonous, but Elecman has a very small hitbox. As long as you keep doing the orbiting loop, even as Elecman reaches the far left wall, it's very unlikely to take damage. Only if you break out of the loop to do something else is when Elecman will catch you by surprise and snap you out of it. Weapons. Elecman's weakness is Rolling Cutter. Even though the Thunder Beam no longer kills you in 3 hits, Rolling Cutter still kills Elecman in 3 hits, doing 8 damage. DWN 11, Bubble Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on shots, 2 or 4 damage on Bubble Lead. Bubble Man's arena is underwater, being the only underwater area of the game where Mega Man can jump much higher, and Bubble Man's pattern overall has been slightly simplified. His bubble lead count has went from 1 to 3 bubbles, to 0 to 2 bubbles, meaning he may start swimming without shooting any bubble leads prior. The bubble lead projectiles also bounce much higher and bound up and down more quickly. When swimming, Bubbleman only shoots once level with you, meaning he will no longer fire shots continuously. His swimming speeds have been altered so his vertical speed is slower going up, but faster going down. He also does not wait for you to land on the ground before restarting his pattern, so he can't be cheesed the same way he could in Mega Man 2 due to these attributes. Buster only. With Bubbleman, you want to stay as far away as possible, so you can better time your jumps properly. If you remember how to fight the Doc Robot boss in Mega Man 3, this iteration of Bubbleman is actually very similar to fighting him there. It's more tricky thanks to the smaller room, and sometimes you have to get lucky if you want to avoid damage. Ideally, you want to jump right after Bubbleman lands, so after he shoots his bubblets and begins swimming, any more shots that he can fire will fly over your head. The luck aspect comes with what kind of bubble lead pattern he chooses. If he keeps swimming without bubble leads, it's easier for him to move to the center, as he goes after you right away. You want him to create one bubble lead because that's the easiest pattern for you to create distance and remain safe. If he keeps creating two bubble leads, the opposite is true, as you have to wait for the bubbles to pass over you before you can run away. Because of this randomness, it is easy for Bubbleman to end up closer to the center of the screen, and if that's the case, the pattern with two bubble leads become much harder, if not impossible to dodge. Weapons. As there are no metal blades, Bubbleman's only weakness is Quick Boomerang, which does 2 damage for each hit. It is possible to hit Bubbleman twice with one boomerang, but due to the weapon having very short range, you will have to fight him up close and risk unavoidable damage. DWN 12, Quick Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on Quick Boomerang. Quick Man's pattern from Mega Man 2 has been simplified. He always starts his fight running forward, which is followed by 2 jumps that cycle back to his running. These 2 jumps have 2 types of height, which are randomly chosen, though Quick Man always jumps to your general position. He may also throw 3 quick boomerangs during one of his jumps, which always move in one of the 8 directions for both movements. Quick Man's choice of when to throw his boomerangs is random now. He may do it during the first jump, the second jump, or for none of the jumps. Buster only. Because of how low Quick Man jumps now, dodging his quick boomerangs has become less flexible and boils down to luck. However, there is a consistent way to guarantee victory despite getting hit constantly. By staying close to Quick Man as he runs into a wall, his jumps will not travel very far. Once he starts jumping, you can back off and let him follow you. Then you can jump over him as he runs. This lets you avoid his contact damage consistently, but since Quick Man can just throw his boomerangs whenever now, there's no real strategy to dodging those anymore. Thankfully, the quick boomerangs themselves do less damage than Quick Man himself, so tanking those boomerangs should be prioritized if push comes to shove. You can always try jumping while backing away from Quick Man, if you think that could divert the quick boomerangs, but it's not a guarantee. Weapons. Quick Man has 2 weaknesses, Time Stopper and Atomic Fire. Time Stopper has the same logic as in Mega Man 2. Freeze Quick Man in place so he loses half of his health. Atomic Fire at full charge will also obliterate half of his health, doing 10 damage. However, Atomic Fire in this game will prematurely shoot the charge if you get hit, so using this weapon on Quick Man is a big gamble. Best to start charging Atomic Fire right away, so by the time Quick Man starts throwing those boomerangs, you should hopefully be at full charge. Once you are able to land that, then you can switch to Time Stopper to finish him off. DWN 14, Flash Man. 4 damage on contact, 3 damage on shots, 0 freeze on Time Stopper. Flashman is arguably the Robot Master who stayed the closest to his Mega Man 2 fight. He still walks around and does a short jump forward if he gets hit or if he touches a wall. However, his jumps do not extend his Time Stopper cooldown, meaning he can suddenly use it in the air. His rapid fire shots now aim in the same spread out angles every time, rather than shooting randomly within those angles. Overall, he is more active in using Time Stopper. Buster only. Although this fight is very simple, trying to avoid his attack is extremely precise. The time stopper window is too small to react to, and you need to be in a very specific area once he freezes time. To do so, you must get into a rhythm of hitting Flashman 4 to 5 times before jumping to avoid getting caught in his crosshairs. 5 times should be done if you're set up to hit him at every opportunity, while 4 times should be done if Flashman was able to run for an extended period. Once you think Flashman is about to use Time Stopper, you need to jump forward so when time is frozen, you are directly or somewhat directly above Flashman. I specify being above Flashman because when Time Stopper ends, Flashman starts moving before Mega Man can be controlled like normal, so this way he'll run under you. His shots also cover a wide area now, so if you're further from him, the highest angle will catch you. Jumping too late makes it easier to get hit this way too. And you don't want to jump too early either, or you'll just land on top of Flashman. It's difficult to get down consistently, but it is possible. Weapons. With no metal blades or crash bombs, Flashman's main weakness is surprisingly Ice Slasher, which does 2 damage and is always available to you when you fight him. However, you should be careful as only one Ice Slasher can exist on screen at a time, meaning Flashman won't jump as much as with the Mega Buster unless you time your shots precisely. He is also weak to Atomic Fire, though not to the extent that Quickman is. Regardless, he takes 5 damage from a fully charged shot, which will be enough to kill him alone, but expect a longer fight than usual. DWN 15 Heat Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on Atomic Fire, 4 damage on Bodily Crash. Heat Man here is much more difficult and tedious, mainly because he no longer takes 2 damage from the Mega Buster. The atomic fires he throws now all fly at the same arc and only slightly spread out from each other. Although he still throws them relative to your position, he can also choose between close throws, medium throws, and far throws. Heat Man's charging attack is mostly the same, though he will always be able to use Atomic Fire at least once before he gets ready for another charge, so he cannot be interrupted anymore. Buster only. This is going to be a long fight. To start off, stand still and shoot Heat Man. If you're lucky, he'll throw his Atomic Fires in short range and miss you. Don't bother dodging the far throw, because it's literally impossible. From there, lure Heat Man's charge as close to the wall as possible, then run as quickly as you can to the other side. You'll also want to shoot Heat Man around the same time frame that he throws Atomic Fire. His charge is usually slow in coming out, but sometimes he can do it almost immediately, so be prepared. Dodging his far throws is going to be the toughest part, as they'll press you right up against the wall, and sometimes it may even be unavoidable. It is also possible to deal 2 hits to Heat Man before he becomes invincible, though the timing window for the second hit is strict. Doing this consistently will speed up the fight, but it's risky because it'll leave you more vulnerable to the far throws. Weapons. Heat Man is once again weak to Bubble Lead, which does 4 damage. The size of the bubbles also makes it much easier to pull off the 2-hit trick. Heat Man also has a semi-weakness to Quick Boomerang, which does 2 damage, and can serve as a replacement to the Mega Buster, only if you really can't stand fighting him with a 1 damage attack. MKN-1 Enker. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on small Mirror Buster, 4 damage on medium Mirror Buster, and 8 damage on large Mirror Buster. Enker is a back and forth boss, always doing actions that make him go back and forth across the room. He can move to the other side by either doing a full jump to the other side, running at high speed and using his barrier spear to block attacks, or doing 2 jumps to get there, though the second jump may be replaced by him going into a run. Once Enker gets to the other side, he will raise his barrier spear high into the air, which will attract shots to it. After raising it for some time, Enker will use Mirror Buster, stabbing his spear forward to fire a projectile. The catch is when Enker raises his spear, he'll still get damaged, but the shots that get attracted to it will power up his Mirror Buster, buffing its speed, size, and damage. There are 3 variations of the projectile. 0 to 1 absorptions release the smallest projectile, 2 to 3 release a medium-sized attack, and 4 to 5 release the biggest. Strategy. Enker does not have a weakness, and only the Mega Buster can damage him. Despite this, he is ironically one of the easier bosses as his whole gimmick works against him. Every time he raises his Mirror Buster, you can get in a lot of damage, and I always do this by quickly moving back and forth to gain distance while shooting. Usually I can get in 4 hits before Enker attacks, but it is possible to get 5 hits, only if you're very precise with timing your shots. His projectiles aren't very hard to dodge, even at its biggest size, so really the only danger is Enker's movement. His full jump and running can be easily reacted to, but when he does a shorter jump, things get a bit technical. During his action after the first smaller jump, you will be able to anticipate and dodge both a run and or jump if you do a full jump near the corner, as Enker's jump height is just high enough that you won't bonk your head on him as you jump. You should also be able to clear his run and narrowly avoid his barrier spear as it gets pointed in the air. Final boss, Wily Machine 1. 0 damage on contact, 4 damage on cutting wheels, 2 damage on laser shot, 4 damage on claw. The first phase is simple, as the only moving aspect of this boss is the lower jaw. The jaw spits out 1 cutting wheel low, then 1 cutting wheel high in an alternating pattern. These enemies have slight variations in the arcs that they follow, but are generally dodged by jumping over the low ones and running under the high ones. The cutting wheels themselves only roll left once fired, never turning back to attack you. After the first phase is defeated, the lower jaw of the machine explodes, and Dr. Wily appears in the cockpit. The second phase gains some new appendages to attack Mega Man with. These include a snapping claw and a small laser turret. The laser turret moves up and down in 2 strict elevations, being stationary for 2 seconds before firing a very quick but weak shot forward. Only the lower elevation can hit you if you're standing, as the upper shots fly over your head. With each shot fired, the turret will change elevations. The snapping claw is always on standby for 3 seconds, 1 second before its first movement. And once that timer ends, the claw will move to your current position at the time of when it started moving. Hang there for a second, then retreat back to the Wily machine. As such, you should not hug the left wall, or the claw will be much more difficult to avoid. Buster only. The first phase is the only one that takes damage from the Mega Buster. After jumping over the first cutting wheel, your best strategy is to actually stay close to the jaw. That way you can dodge the high ones by letting them fly over your head. If the high ones get sent further, you will have more room to jump over the low ones, regardless of their arc. If the high ones are sent closer, you will have to do a bit of a precise jump to dodge the low one and avoid hitting the high one as it comes down. It's easier than it sounds though, and as long as you keep up your offensive, the first phase will go down easily. Weapons. The first phase is weak to atomic fire, with each fully charged shot doing 10 damage. As with Quickman, you don't want to take damage or else you'll release the charge and the cutting wheels will tank it. While charging it up, you'll have to dodge at least 3 cutting wheels before it can be fully prepared. The second phase can only be damaged by 1 weapon, Mirror Buster. To do damage, simply hold the weapon out to create a barrier in front of you, which can reflect the laser shots back at the Wily machine. You can stand in place to reflect the low shots, but you will have to jump up to reflect the high shots. The barrier does not interact with the claw, and each reflected shot does 2 damage to the Wily machine, so 10 reflected shots are needed to defeat the boss. This second phase focuses more on patience, and as with the first phase, you'll want to stay close to the Wily machine, so when you anticipate the claw coming at you, you can simply back off. Although this phase isn't very difficult at all, be very careful with your Mirror Buster ammo going through the stage prior, because you need half of a full ammo bar. If you don't have enough to defeat this phase, or die using up its ammo, you'll be forced to game over and play the entire stage from the beginning. With all of the bosses discussed, I've made a couple of tier lists calculated through research. One for Buster only difficulty, one for weapons allowed, and one for my personal opinion on the overall quality of the fights. For the former two, I fought the bosses each 10 times in a row to calculate how much damage I took within those 10 battles, and if there were any ties, I broke the ties by doing more rounds. For weapons, I defaulted to either the weakness or the ones I preferred to use, and I did not break ties. And now for my personal opinion on the fights. Heat Man. The altercations to his atomic fire take advantage of the cramped space to make players miserable. It's completely unfair. This is also the longest fight in the game, Buster only. Overall, a frustrating mess that will test your patience. Fireman. This is just sad. He needed to be nerfed after how aggressive he was to first-time players, but this went way too far. Quickman. This is where the smaller rooms restrict both Quickman and Mega Man's movements. He jumps so low to the ground now that he's basically stomping around while trapping you in the corners, and there's so much luck to rely on if you want to defeat him without taking damage. Cutman. Although he's harder now, his random jumps and movements have pushed him into unfair territory. Even outside of that, he's less fun in general thanks to the flat floor. You just kinda go back and forth with him now. Oh, and sometimes shots go through him for some reason. Iceman. His attacks are so much easier to dodge now that you probably won't even realize that he still kills in 3 hits. Elecman. As crazy as it sounds, he's the only Robot Master who I think got improved in Dr. Wily's Revenge. His 3-hit kill has been removed, and his modified jumps allow you to engage him in a unique way than before. Yes, the way you do it is about as exploitable as Toadman, but it's still unique. Bubbleman. The flickering is not pleasant to look at, and I don't understand why the parameters were configured the way they were. His descent is too fast and gives you little time to create distance, and the smaller room makes his projectiles more annoying to avoid. Flashman. He's fought in basically his refight arena from Mega Man 2, and although that makes his movement less interesting, he's more aggressive with Time Stopper, which is a step in the right direction, but it's too precise to dodge now. There's a bit too many artificial factors that make it more complicated than it needed to be. Enker. It feels weird that Enker came out easier than most of the Robot Masters. He has a nice idea with absorbing shots into stronger attacks, but it came off as unintuitive more than anything. His Mirror Buster is too easy to dodge no matter what size it is, meaning he's just going to die quickly. That leaves only his movement to give you trouble, and although it's perfectly dodgeable, it feels a little stingy to do so. Wily Machine 1, Phase 2. Despite how brutal the punishment of failure can be, this is a neat challenge with Mirror Buster, having to be active with reflecting shots and baiting the claw. It's unfortunately one of those patterns that has to be easy, or else the game will never be beaten. Wily Machine 1, both phases. Overall, this boss fight brings good closure to the game, especially after such a long stage. Each phase has good contrast too, with Phase 1 being reactive and Phase 2 being patience focused. Wily Machine 1, Phase 1. These cutting wheels are surprisingly fun to dodge with the arcs being varied and switching up all the time. You occasionally get a trickier combination to avoid too, and I like Atomic Fire being the weakness. With the way it's designed, it rewards you for avoiding damage. Overall, the boss roster in Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge is problematic in more or less the same way that the first Mega Man was, but the smaller rooms have the side effect of making most boss patterns more cheap. Thankfully, none of them are hard enough to really take advantage of the fact that there are no E-Tanks in this game, but those unfamiliar with the NES games will have a rough time with at least half of these guys. The 2 unique bosses managed to pick up the slack a little bit though, despite their issues. Well folks, that's it for Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge. Part 1 is done. Take a small break if you want before continuing on to Part 2, because that's what's coming up next. Mega Man GB2. DWN 9, Metal Man. 4 damage on contact, 1 damage on Metal Blade. Metal Man is one of the easiest bosses in the game, mainly due to how his pattern from Mega Man 2 has been simplified and with the addition of a notorious bug. The conveyor belt does not change direction, only going leftwards throughout the fight. Metal Man now never attacks on his own. You must shoot or get close to provoke him. He only has 1 jumping height when you make him jump by shooting, in which case he always throws 2 Metal Blades, which are much slower and weaker. Metal Man can also jump straight up if there is a projectile already coming his way, as to dodge it. His sideway jumps that are meant to get away are now directed towards your general position, and he moves a lot further. With this in mind, you can slide under Metal Man after he jumps straight up, which should cause him to jump rightwards and rebound off the wall. From this position, Metal Man should then be lured to the other wall, where he will get stuck inside of it trying to attack. Pulling off this exploit will guarantee victory, as he cannot fight back provided you keep your distance. Buster only. Ignoring that bug, as it requires you to take damage, there is a very simple pattern you can do to beat Metal Man safely. To start, walk to the center, then jump up and shoot. Metal Man will jump into it and prepare to throw 2 metal blades. From there, land back down to the center, shoot him as he lands, and walk to the left. This will bait the first metal blade straight down and set you up to jump the second one. You can repeat these movements over and over for a secure victory, but you should only shoot twice per pattern. If you fire a shot from the left early, Metal Man will actually jump over it and attack unexpectedly, which can complicate things. Weapons. Really, the only weapon that actually does damage to him is Crash Bomb, his new weakness. Each bomb does 5 damage and will kill in 4 hits, but you'll need the full ammo bar. Unfortunately, the explosions are so small that they won't be able to hurt Metal Man unless he jumps into a spot right where a bomb was planted, though this is difficult to pull off. Even then, the explosion does not multi-hit in Game Boy 2, so don't bother. Also, even though there are no rematches, Metal Man can still die in 2 hits from his own weapon, the Metal Blades, which you'd need a cheat device for. DWN-10, Airman. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on air shooter. Airman has an identical pattern to his NES fight, but it has been simplified. He now only shoots 4 tornadoes at a time and will always be blowing you away from him, independent from the tornado's own movements. The tornadoes themselves do not accelerate, only moving at a set speed once they get going, and they also have less formations. Airman's jumps are a little shorter in height, but you have a slide to make it easier to dodge him anyway. You also cannot hide behind Airman anymore. Buster only. Despite him being slower, Airman can still be annoying. He has less formations to his tornadoes, though now that he has a formation that I'm very much convinced is undodgeable no matter what I do, he has a higher chance of using that one. His other formations are a bit tricky. Thanks to how GB2's slide functions, this one can be tough, but the easiest way to avoid it is to slide as soon as it moves, then jump over it once you're positioned. Since Airman is much slower in attacking, you can damage him at a faster rate than before. Anytime the tornado is given opening, take it, and you'll always deal more damage than he can deal to you. By the time he reaches the other side, he should be down. Weapons. As with Metal Man, Airman can only be hurt by 1 weapon. Thankfully, his weakness is still Leaf Shield, doing 7 damage. Given Leaf Shield's unique properties in this game, Airman can get hit twice with 1 shield, and since the leaves now individually ding off of the tornadoes, there's a chance one of them may pass through and still hit Airman. DWN-13, Crash Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on Crash Bomb, 2 damage on Crash Bomb Explosion. While still very easy, Crash Man's pattern has been altered a bit. Crash Man always moves at a consistent speed, which means that his jump, which is very floaty in this game, only moves 1 set distance each time. He also won't jump by your command if he is too close to the wall. The Crash Bomb is slower and much smaller in size and explosion, though it actually dings off shots. You should be careful though, as a bug in this battle may interrupt Mega Man from performing a jump, cutting it short. Buster only. Your movement in this fight is not reliable enough to encourage jumping very much, so for most of the fight you want to stay grounded. As Crash Man reaches you, do a short hop and fire twice to make him jump. Although he'll only get hit once, there is the rare occasion he may not jump at all from your button press and just run into you, so the second shot is primarily a failsafe. Since the Crash Bomb is very slow, you can just walk underneath Crash Man and get to the other side. Although you can repeat this strategy for the whole fight, it is going to be common that Crash Man may jump on his own after shooting a Crash Bomb. Thankfully, his jump doesn't go far enough to reach you, and he can't shoot another bomb thanks to the explosion, so he's mostly just getting close to you quicker. If you're precise, you can improvise and get 2 hits off of this. The first is as he lands, and the second is as you short hop to make him jump. Weapons. Crashman only takes extra damage from Air Shooter, his original weakness. This time, however, it only does 2 damage. Since 2 is also the amount of ammo Air Shooter consumes, Crashman will be reduced to 1 HP if all of the tornado shots have been landed. Thus, the weapon cannot defeat Crashman by himself. For strictly using non-buster weapons, you will have to do the first and or last hit while having Rush Jet or Rush Marine equipped. None of the other weapons do damage. DWN-16, Woodman. 4 damage on contact, 1 damage on falling leaves, 1 damage on leaf shield. Woodman has been significantly nerfed, to the point where he's now one of the easiest bosses in the game. His leaf shield no longer fully protects him, meaning stray shots can still pass through even when Mega Man is shooting from far away. The leaf shield is much weaker and slower, which in turn makes it harder to jump over. Woodman also throws just 3 leaves into the air. When they fall down, they barely move sideways, so they can simply be avoided by standing in a general spot between them. Buster only. Since the leaf shield is slower, it is the toughest attack to dodge consistently. I'm convinced it's frame perfect, but the damage is so minuscule it hardly matters. Poor Woodman can be bullied through his shield, even without having to get up close, and if you're aggressive, he'll always go down before he can pull up a 3rd leaf shield. If you don't care about taking damage, you're in luck, since Woodman's projectiles do very little damage, and shots simply pass through leaf shield. You can easily win by just standing in place, tanking damage, and mindlessly spamming. Even at half health, you will be able to kill Woodman this way. Weapons. Woodman's main weakness is now Metal Blade, which does 5 damage. Given the metal blades are bigger, it is much harder to shoot through the shield with them, though still possible. Although Air Shooter only does 1 damage now, Woodman still has his secondary weakness to Crash Bomb, and takes 2 damage from it. However, they cannot be shot at the shield to do damage, because the explosions are very short-ranged, so it is not recommended to use it. DWN-17, Needle Man. 4 damage on contact, 1 damage on Needle Cannon, 4 damage on Needle Hammer. Compared to his debut appearance in Mega Man 3, Needle Man has been nerfed in difficulty, mostly because his pattern is now distance-oriented. If you are far away from him, he will attack with his Needle Cannon, with the needles traveling much slower. If you stay close to him, he will attack with Needle Hammer, which is shorter in range. Needle Man's jumps are also floatier, and he can only jump in place or forward a set distance. If Needle Man doesn't turn around to headbutt you after jumping over you, he has a big tendency to jump in the wrong direction, hopping at the wall and ignoring you for a long period of time. The Needle Hammer's hitbox is missing at the tip of the attack, so you can stand right where the tip will appear and remain unharmed, while still tricking Needleman into using headbutts because of his new attack selection. Buster only. The hardest part of the fight is at the beginning, because you have to react to what Needleman does. Ultimately, you want to get close to him so he can use his headbutts and jump around. But you start off the fight far away from him. This gives him a high chance to start attacking with Needle Cannon. Although it does very little damage, the slow speed of the needles makes it impossible to jump and weave between them. Rather, once you see Needleman jump to the ceiling, stay far away so you can bait the needles and run under them, putting you into close distance with Needleman. Don't count on Needleman always starting off the fight with Needle Cannon, because he won't. You do want to stay far away to dodge the needles, but if you stay in the corner waiting for them, Needleman may jump forward right away and beat you up with headbutts, so you need to start the fight running towards him, just in case. Once the needles are gone and you're close to him, you've basically won. Keep this distance throughout the rest of the fight, move under his forward jumps, and he'll be helpless to defend himself. Weapons. Needleman is interesting in that he has 2 weaknesses. His new primary weakness is Topspin, which does 5 damage per hit. While you still get hurt upon successfully hitting him, the weapon will no longer drain instantly. To avoid as much damage as possible, tank one of the needles before attacking. If that is not available, Needleman is also weak to Air Shooter, which does 3 damage to him and can hit him easily since he jumps all the time. It's also a weapon that you will always have on you coming into this fight. DWN-18 Magnet Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on magnet missile. Magnet Man's pattern is modified slightly. His jumps are a bit floatier, but his magnet missiles move a bit slower. The latter fact means you will have to do a bit tighter dodging than usual. He also chooses these attacks based on distance, where he is more likely to use magnet missile if you stay close to him, otherwise he has a higher chance of pulling you in. Buster only. The smaller screen size is what makes Magnet Man a bit tricky to beat without taking damage. Because his magnet missiles move so slowly, he will start jumping to the other side while they are still in play, and you'll have to deal with 2 threats at once. The best way to get around this is to wait in the corner until the first magnet missile travels downward. Once that happens, walk forward to bring them all down near the sides, and you will be able to avoid Magnet Man from there. Only slide if you need to get to a corner in preparation for the magnet missiles. As you move around, you'll want to shoot Magnet Man at every opportunity, and just like in the NES, you can get in 3 shots each time he does his 2 jumps. Once you got that down, Magnet Man has not much else to throw at you. Weapons. Funnily enough, both of Magnet Man's biggest weaknesses are not in this game, so now he is weak to Needle Cannon, and takes 3 damage from each hit. If that is not available, Metal Blade is a secondary weakness that does 2 damage, and will always be available to you. Interestingly enough, Magnet Man is weak to his own weapon, and takes 3 damage to it, but you would only learn about this with a cheat device. DWN-20 Hard Man. 4 damage on contact, 1 damage on hard knuckle, 4+4 damage on body press. Hardman's pattern has been modified, though he is generally slower. He does not shoot his hard knuckles as quickly, meaning you will have to dodge them differently. His large jump is now targeted to land on your current position, rather than jumping way over you. The hard knuckles also ding shots now, but the tanking strategy is even more applicable here. Buster only. In order to dodge the hard knuckles consistently, you'll have to do some specific maneuvers. Before Hardman fires the first one, you want to jump up in front of him to lure the first one all the way up, then walk away from Hardman. This baits the hard knuckles rebound into aiming at the ground and missing you. Dodging the second one should be done by jumping, but you want to lure this fist as close to the wall as possible, so when you jump over it, the rebound aims upward and misses you. As for Hardman's jumps, they cover less distance, so you have to get used to sliding under him during his descent. Oftentimes, he'll get himself in the center of the room, and that will make dodging the hard knuckles a bit trickier with the limited space, but still possible. If you damage Hardman at every opportunity, he should be defeated after the 3rd body slam attack. Weapons. Hardman's weakness is Magnet Missile, which does 4 damage. However, you should be careful with your shots, as the hard knuckles will not only ding the weapon, but they also attract the magnets to it. Hardman is also weak to his own weapon, Hard Knuckle, which does 3 damage, but this can only be discovered through a cheat device, as there are no rematches. DWN-21 Top Man. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on tops, 4 damage on top spin. Top Man's pattern is almost completely unchanged, except that his first top spin is the same speed as the others, making him one of the easiest bosses in the game. The top projectiles that he throws are sent out slower, move slower across the screen, and ding shots. Buster only. Surprisingly, you'll have more trouble dodging the tops here than Top Man's top spin. Although the tops are much slower, their aiming doesn't exactly target your position directly. Rather, they aim in loose digital directions, which usually means they might either go downwards or suddenly jolt diagonally and hit you by surprise. To avoid this, you should stand under the lowest of the 3 tops when they are first thrown out. When they all launch at you, slide away to the wall. Most of the time the tops will go down, but occasionally the lowest one will aim in a more noticeable diagonal. It is still dodgeable, but you can't jump out of a slide and you have to wait for the slide to finish first. As for damaging Top Man, he can be killed before he can use Top Spin a 4th time. Though since his tops can block shots, you'll have to shoot multiple times when he first throws them out, so you don't miss a beat. Weapons. Top Man's weakness is, once again, Hard Knuckle, which does 4 damage. If you time and aim your shots correctly, you can kill Top Man just before his tops can reach you. Alternatively, Needle Cannon is a secondary weakness that does 2 damage. This next bit is a little archaic, and it isn't just about Top Man, but each of the Robot Masters from Mega Man 3 have secondary weaknesses to Sakugarne, taking 2 damage per attack. Unfortunately, you need a cheat device to try this out. DLN-1, Quint. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on ground debris. As much as I don't like giving this guy any worthwhile attention, it wouldn't be a fair boss guide if I ignored him. So prepare yourself, Quint, as I'm giving all the folks watching this video another opportunity to point and laugh at the hippie. Quint is by far the easiest boss in the game, and one of the easiest in the entire franchise. Piloting a signature pogo drill, the Sakugarne, his pattern consists of him using the drill to send out 3 sets of 4 rocks, 2 on each side of him. However, these rocks don't go very far, and can be ignored simply by not being close to him. After that, he will jump to your position and repeat his pattern from there. Only his head will take damage, so every other part of his body, including Sakugarne, will block shots. Buster only. Honestly, the hardest part about this fight is that Quint summons Sakugarne to drop down the center, and that can catch you by surprise. After that, you can do short hops and plow your lemons into Quint's head until he stops producing rocks, which means he's going to jump. You can either just walk away from him, or walk under him. I'm gonna be honest, if you find yourself struggling against Quint, even after this information, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't be allowed to play video games anymore. And I'm talking a restraining order to keep you 50 yards away from any type of console, handheld, or electronic device. God, please don't be that person. Weapons. Quint's main weakness is Hard Knuckle, which can easily hit his head and does 5 damage. Unlike all other Game Boy bosses who have 19 HP, Quint has 32, so this takes him out in 6 hits. In fact, you can actually kill Quint with just 1 jump, since Hard Knuckle stops you midair when you fire. Besides that, every other weapon except for the Mega Buster is actually a secondary weakness that does 2 damage, with Crash Bomb doing a bit extra with 4 damage. Final boss, Wily Machine 2. 4 damage on contact, 2 damage on bouncing bombs, 2 damage on grounded talon, 3 damage on energy shot, 2 damage on bomb explosion, 2 damage on angry missile, and 2 damage on little robots. There are a total of 3 phases, which each consist of separate battlesuits controlled by Dr. Wily from a flying transport that gets attached to them. When one form is destroyed, by dealing a total of 12 damage, this part will fly away and attach to the next form. The first form contains a pair of legs, looking similar to a raptor. This form and all the others have a set order of attacks that they cycle through. The first for this one is to do a high jump to your position. Upon landing, it will drop a bouncing bomb in your direction, and you have to walk or slide under it to avoid damage. After some waiting, the Wily Machine attacks by shooting one of its talons straight forward along the ground, and the pattern repeats itself from here. The second form contains 2 cannons and tank treads, and hangs out on the right side. It starts out by shooting 2 energy orbs, one at a time, from its arms at your position. After the second orbit's launched, it slowly drives to the center, where it launches a bouncing bomb, just like in the first phase. However, once you pass under this particular bomb, it will explode on the ground, releasing 2 fiery projectiles to fly up diagonally. The boss returns to the corner of the screen and repeats its attack patterns there. The third and final form contains legs and a tail, similar to a large dinosaur. The first attack is to fire an angry missile weapon, which homes in on your position for a second before continuing to move in a straight line. The second attack is to launch 4 little robots from its tail to rain down on you from above, and you will have to stand in between them to dodge it. Lastly, the skull on the machine extends its neck for a bit, though this does not do anything. Buster only. This is going to be the longest and trickiest battle the game will throw at you, mostly because of how distinct each phase is with their attacks. Phase 1 is the most mobile of all, but also the easiest to evade. As long as you remember to slide as soon as Wily jumps at you, you'll be good, though since he targets your position, you want to keep him away from the center. If he's at the corners, you can more comfortably walk under the bouncing bomb, and the grounded nail is easily jumped over. Phase 2's energy shots can be tricky, as there is little downtime in between the 2 shots. For me, the best strategy is to jump forward as soon as the first energy shot is fired, so the second one gets shot in the air and misses me. The bouncing bomb here is also avoided by just walking under it once you have room, but make sure to stay away from it or you'll be surprised by the explosion. Phase 3's Angry Missile is the trickiest attack to dodge, but the most important thing to know is that the missile will lock onto you perfectly no matter where you are, until it gets halfway across the screen, then it commits to the one direction it was going in. As such, you want to lure the missile to the corner and jump over it at the last second. You also want the missile to be going at a slightly downward angle, so jumping over it is easier, because if the missile is going at an upward angle, it'll be hard to jump over, or even encourage you to slide under it. The best way to get a downwards angle consistently is to let the missile start locking on while you're in the air and attacking Wily, so the missile curves down to reach you at the corner. The little robots afterwards aren't too bad to avoid. Despite their quick speed, they open up a reasonable window for you to stand in between them. Weapons. The only weapon that can hurt Wily Machine 2 in any phase is Sakugarne. While you can do 2 damage with each hit, you gotta remember that Sakugarne sucks and should not be used at all. Every time you bounce on the boss, you'll inevitably take damage, and although you can win the damage race in phases 1 and 2, Sakugarne will run out of ammo eventually. Even if I burn all my E-tanks just to say I beat Wily Machine 2 with Sakugarne, I can't, because it's genuinely not possible. Phase 3 especially has such janky collision that it's pretty much a coin flip whether you or Wily wins the damage race. Avoid Sakugarne at all costs. With all of the bosses discussed, I've made a couple of tier lists calculated through research. One for Buster only difficulty, one for weapons allowed, and one for my personal opinion on the overall quality of the fights. For the former 2, I fought the bosses each 10 times in a row to calculate how much damage I took within those 10 battles, and if there were any ties, I broke the ties by doing more rounds. For weapons, I defaulted to either the weakness or the ones I preferred to use, and I did not break ties. And now for my personal opinions on the fights. Quint. Zeros are very rare cases to me, as I only hand them out to bosses who I believe are both fundamentally unpolished and frustrating to an extreme degree. But Quint isn't either of those. In fact, his pattern would actually make for an acceptable first boss. Though the thing with Quint is, he's the second to last opponent in the game, and his implementation is so bizarre and weird that it created this reputation that he can never escape from. He has 32 HP, no visible health bar, no boss music, a negligible pattern, an anticlimactic defeat, and he's the unique character of this game. To me, Quint is the prime example of a character whose unapologetically depressing debut got him turned into a punching bag, a missed opportunity, and a waste of time and space. To put it informally, a steaming pile of mutated horse shit. Woodman. Why he does so little damage on top of being much harder to dodge is beyond me, but he's so mindless anyway, why bother? Nothing stops you from sitting still and turning off your brain while you shoot him to death. Metal Man. Everything about him here is a complete downgrade. The oversimplifications butchered any and all engagement he used to have, leaving you with a repetitive afterthought. And stuff like that wall glitch have me to believe that these guys were not tested in any capacity. Needleman. He's just broken now, with the lack of a good attack hitbox or movement. It's the kind of pattern where you have to break it if you don't want to face the alternative. In this case, it's getting pummeled by needles that clutter the screen. Airman. Well, he's much slower and less interesting already, but now that he has fewer tornado formations, you are more likely to get hammered with a now undodgeable pattern. Hardman. For the longest time, I thought the hard knuckles were undodgeable, and that frustrated me to no end. Turns out they are dodgeable, and the way to do it is so unintuitive that I don't blame you for just tanking him and calling it a day. Top Man. He's probably the least different out of the 8 Robot Masters, but the way the tops aim at you now can be frustrating as it's occasionally undodgeable, depending on your position relative to the tops. Crashman. Although his slower speed means he cannot be as engaging as he used to, you can still make an effort to hit him multiple times per attack cycle. He also has a weakness that doesn't kill him instantly, so you have to learn his new quirks one way or another. Wily Machine 2, Phase 2. The tank form has poor shooting animations, and happens to go down the quickest out of all the phases. While everything is dodgeable, the bomb occasionally glitches out and bounces in a different spot, and that's annoying to adjust to. Wily Machine 2, Phase 3. The dino form is completely stationary, but that works well with the Angry Missile, which is a really fun attack on its own. Having to bait it into a set direction always felt intuitive and reactionary, though I think more could have been done with the little robots, as Wily stays defenseless for too long afterwards. That skull taunt is also misleading. It would leave people to believe that's the weak spot, but no, it just does nothing. Magnet Man. This version of Magnet Man surprisingly holds up well. Unintentional as that might be, but slowing down the magnet missiles so they overlap a bit with Magnet Man's jumps actually gives a new twist to how you interact with both obstacles. It is a little strange that he exclusively uses missiles most of the time, because it's rare to see him use the magnet pull at all. Wily Machine 2, All Phases. Despite how uncomfortable Wily looks inside of his cockpit, he manages to give you an engaging fight in spite of its rushed presentation. Each phase progressively trades speed for extra firepower, each demanding more out of you to dodge, and it can very well mislead you into believing he's got a huge difficulty spike in comparison to everyone else. Wily Machine 2, Phase 1. The Raptor form actually has a nice flow to it, with sliding underneath his big jump and immediately have to worry about a bomb. The attack timings are separated just enough that doing multiple hits at once would require more technical skill than you would assume. Overall, this is the weakest boss roster that I've come across so far. Although some of the Robot Masters come close, nobody's an improvement from before. And like I said with Metal Man, it feels like they weren't tested in any capacity. Generally speaking, bosses are much slower and do way too little damage across the board. I could pile on more critical issues, but I believe I've gotten my points across. Mega Man GB2 is a game you really shouldn't take seriously, and same goes for the overarching boss design. Well, that's it for the video. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment if you have something to say, and as per usual, check the links in the description if you want more out of my channel, including my own Discord server, DeMontropolis. I hope this guide will prove useful in helping folks get better at Dr. Wily's Revenge, and even GB2 had some interesting patterns worth exploring. With that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.